The key didn't turn. I tried it again, slower this time, thinking maybe my hands were shaking too much from the cold. They were, but that wasn't the problem. The lock had been changed. I was standing on the porch of my own home, Building 49117, Fort Liberty Family Housing, at 11:40 at night, still in my ACUs, my duffel bag slumped against the railing, 6 days early from a 9-month rotation in Kuwait. I hadn't showered since Ramstein. I smelled like recycled cabin air and stale coffee, and my key didn't fit my own front door. I knocked, not loud, not angry, just confused. From inside, I heard a woman laugh. Not a TV laugh, a real one, close, comfortable, the kind of laugh that belongs in a home. My home. Kyle opened the door in gym shorts and a t-shirt I didn't recognize. He didn't hug me. He didn't smile. He blocked the doorway with his shoulder, one hand on the frame, and his face did something I'd never seen before. It went completely flat. Like I was a package delivered to the wrong address. You weren't supposed to be here until Tuesday. Behind him, sitting on my couch, in the bathrobe I'd bought at the PX 2 Christmases ago, was a woman I'd never seen in my life. She had dark hair pulled back in a clip. She was holding a bowl of popcorn in one hand, and in her lap, curled up in pajamas with little strawberries on them, was my daughter, Lily, 3 years old. The woman looked at me. Her eyes went wide. She set the popcorn down carefully, like moving slowly would make her invisible. Kyle didn't step aside. Lily lifted her head from the woman's lap, looked at me through the screen door, looked right at me, and said, "Daddy, who's that lady?" 4 words. I'd carried her heartbeat in my chest for 9 months. I'd taped her photo to the wall above my rack in Kuwait, and stared at it every night until my eyes burned. I'd counted days. I'd counted hours. I'd bought her a stuffed camel at the airport in Frankfurt because I thought she'd think the humps were funny. And she looked at me like I was a stranger. My duffel slid off my shoulder and hit the porch floor. I didn't pick it up. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at a life that used to be mine, through a door that wouldn't open. My 3-year-old daughter didn't know my face. But let me back up a little. It started 7 years ago at a barbecue on the 4th of July in Fayetteville. I was 22, fresh out of AIT, and still walking like I owned the world, because I did. Or at least the small corner of it the Army had assigned me. Kyle was 23, funny, and the only guy at the party who asked me what my MOS was before he asked for my number. He drove 4 hours from Raleigh the following weekend, just to take me to dinner at a rib place on Yadkin Road. He wrote me a letter during my first field exercise, an actual letter, on paper, with a stamp. I still had it in a shoebox under the bed, or I did before somebody changed the locks. We married 8 months later at the Cumberland County Courthouse. No big ceremony. Just us, a judge, and his mother Gloria, who wore a face like she was attending a sentencing. Gloria never liked me. I was too loud, too direct, too military. She wanted Kyle to marry a girl from Raleigh who stayed home and hosted brunches and called her mother-in-law twice a week. Instead, he married a logistics specialist who could inventory a shipping container in under 6 minutes and field strip a weapon faster than half her platoon. Gloria didn't say congratulations at the wedding. She said, "Well, I hope you know what you're giving up." I didn't know what she meant. I do now. The first 2 years were good, genuinely good. Kyle worked at an auto parts store in Spring Lake. I made E5 ahead of the promotion timeline. We moved into on-post housing, Building 4917, a 2-bedroom unit with a cracked driveway, a kitchen window that wouldn't close all the way, and a backyard the size of a parking space. I loved it. It was ours. Kyle said it felt like living in a shoebox on a base full of shoeboxes. That was the first crack. I didn't hear it then. I hear it now, every time I think about it. Lily was born during a home rotation in October, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, at Womack Army Medical Center. She came out screaming, and Kyle cried harder than she did. He held her in the recovery room like she was made of glass, one hand behind her head, whispering things I couldn't hear. I remember looking at them under that hospital light and thinking, this is going to work. This family is going to be okay. 6 months later, I got orders for Kuwait. 9 months. Logistics support for a sustainment brigade out of Camp Arifjan. Standard rotation. I'd done a shorter deployment before, 4 months to Poland, and Kyle had managed. He complained about the grocery runs and the laundry and the base traffic, but he did them. This time was different. Lily was 6 months old. I was leaving a baby, and the look on Kyle's face when I told him wasn't sadness. It was something harder to name. Inconvenience, maybe. Like I'd told him the car needed new brakes. I set up everything before I left. DFAS allotment, $1,200 a month, routed directly to our joint account at Fort Liberty Federal Credit Union for Lily's expenses. TRICARE enrollment current. Emergency contacts listed with the Family Readiness Group. Limited power of attorney filed through JAG. Enough for Kyle to handle housing maintenance and medical decisions for Lily. Nothing more. I made a binder. A real one. Color-coded tabs, emergency numbers, pediatrician schedule, TRICARE authorization codes. Kyle laughed when I handed it to him. Babe, she's a baby, not a supply chain. He never opened it. I found it on the hall closet shelf 9 months later, still in the plastic sleeve. 2 months into deployment, Kyle stopped answering video calls during bath time. He said Lily was fussy. He said the Wi-Fi was bad. He said he'd call me back. He never called back. I'd sit in the MWR tent at Camp Arifjan staring at a phone that didn't ring, telling myself it didn't mean anything. Babies are hard, he's tired. Give him grace. 4 months in, my neighbor Donna texted me. Not about Lily. About a gray Hyundai Sonata parked in our driveway at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Just thought you should know, she wrote. It's been there 3 nights this week. I told myself it was his sister's car. It wasn't the same color as his sister's car, and his sister lived in Wilmington, 3 hours away, but I told myself what I needed to hear. When you're running convoy logistics at a forward operating base, you don't get to fall apart over a parking situation at home. You file the feeling. You check the next box. You survive. 7 months in, Kyle missed Lily's 1-year checkup. The FRG coordinator called me about it. I rescheduled it from 7,000 miles away, through TRICARE Online, then called Kyle. He said he forgot. Our daughter's 12-month wellness visit. I didn't yell. I sat in the dark in my quarters and stared at the wall for 20 minutes, then went back to work. At 8 months, my unit got bumped to an earlier flight out of theater, 6 days ahead of schedule. I didn't tell Kyle. Part of me wanted to surprise Lily. Part of me, the part I didn't let myself examine too closely, wanted to see what the house looked like when nobody knew I was coming. I thought the surprise would be the best moment of my life. I had no idea what was waiting behind that door. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up my duffel, turned around, walked down the 3 porch steps, put my bag in the trunk of my car, the car that had been sitting in the long-term lot at the Fayetteville Regional Airport for 9 months, and drove to Donna's house. It was midnight. She opened the door in a bathrobe with her reading glasses still on. She looked at my face. She didn't ask a single question. She just stepped aside and pointed toward the kitchen. I sat at her table while she made coffee. The overhead light buzzed the way fluorescent lights do when one of the tubes is going. I could still smell the flight on my skin, jet fuel and recycled air. The clock on Donna's microwave said 12:17 a.m. I stared at it because looking at anything else felt like too much. She set a mug in front of me. Cream, no sugar. She remembered from cookouts 2 summers ago. Something about that my neighbor remembered how I took my coffee, and my husband didn't remember to keep my name on our front door, made the back of my throat burn. How long? I said. Donna sat down across from me. She wrapped both hands around her mug and didn't look up for a while. Her name is Tessa. She's been there since about April. 3 months. I was doing container inventory in the Kuwaiti desert in 40 degrees Celsius heat, while a woman named Tessa was sleeping in my bed, wearing my robe, holding my daughter. He told the neighbors you got reassigned, Donna continued quietly. Said you were going to Fort Cavazos. Permanently. Told everyone you left voluntarily. That the marriage was over and you didn't want custody. I set my coffee down slowly. My hands were steady. The rest of me wasn't. What does Lily call her? Donna closed her eyes. Mama T. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Mama T. My daughter had a new name for a new mother. She'd learned it while I was 7,000 miles away, counting shipping containers, and staring at her photo on my wall every night. Mama T. 2 syllables that erased 9 months of missing her. Donna opened her eyes and looked at me carefully. She looked scared, not of me, but for me, like she was about to hand me something heavy and fragile at the same time. Rachel, there's something else. I wasn't sure when to tell you, or if I even should, but you need to know. Tell me. About 6 weeks ago, a notice went up at the housing office. Your unit was listed as reassigned. Kyle went in personally and told them you'd PCS to Fort Cavazos. He had paperwork with him, a DA Form 4187, with your signature on it. He filed it to transfer the housing assignment into his name. I stared at her. The buzzing light above us seemed louder. I never signed a 4187. I know. That's a federal form. A personnel action request. I know. I sat there and let it settle. A forged DA Form 4187, submitted to a government housing office on a military installation with my name and a signature I never gave. This wasn't just a man who got lonely during a deployment and made a mistake. This was calculated. This was someone who sat down, studied the form, practiced my signature, and walked it into a federal office to erase me from my own home and my own daughter's life. The kitchen was quiet. Donna watched me. I think she expected me to break. I didn't. I picked up my phone. It was 1:47 in the morning. I called staff duty at Fort Liberty. By sunrise, I had an appointment with JAG. The JAG office at Fort Liberty Legal Assistance smelled like printer toner and carpet cleaner. I was there at 07:30, first appointment of the morning, in a clean uniform with my hair regulation tight, and a yellow legal pad I'd bought at the shopette on the way over. I hadn't slept in 31 hours. My handwriting was steady anyway. Captain Reeves was young, maybe 27, with a plain black coffee on his desk and a framed JAG Corps insignia on the wall. He had a calm way about him, the kind of calm that comes from hearing bad things every day, and learning to keep his face level through all of them. He listened to everything. He didn't interrupt. He took notes in a green government-issue notebook and didn't react to anything I said until I said the words, forged 4187. Then he stopped writing. He set his pen down slowly and looked at me. Say that again, Staff Sergeant. I said it again. He turned to his computer and pulled up the garrison housing records. It took him less than 3 minutes to find it. A DA Form 4187, filed 4 months earlier, requesting reassignment of Building 4917 from Staff Sergeant Rachel Torres to dependent spouse Kyle James Torres, citing a permanent change of station to Fort Cavazos, Texas. My signature was at the bottom, clear as day. I'd never seen the document in my life. Captain Reeves leaned back. He folded his hands. His expression changed. Not dramatic, just sharper, like a gear clicking into place. Staff Sergeant Torres, I want to be very clear about something. This isn't just a domestic situation. This is fraud against the federal government. The 4187 is a controlled Army form. Forging a signature on it constitutes a criminal act under both civilian law and the UCMJ. I nodded. My chest was tight, but my voice was even. I told him I wanted to do this right. All of it. We're going to handle this in 2 tracks, he said. Track 1 is custody. That goes through Cumberland County Family Court with military input and JAG oversight. Track 2 is the criminal side. The forged 4187, the potential larceny, the housing fraud. That's going to go through military investigative channels. CID will likely get involved. Regardless of what the civilian court decides, the military side moves on its own. He paused and looked at me directly. How thorough do you want to be? I looked at him. I'm logistics, sir. Thorough is what I do. He almost smiled. Day 2, I went to DFAS. I'd been checking our joint account from Kuwait on my phone, and the balances had always looked low but reasonable. I assumed the $1,200 monthly allotment was going to Lily's expenses. Diapers, formula, clothes, the pediatrician. It wasn't. The pay clerk pulled up my records on her monitor and turned the screen so I could see it. The allotment was depositing on the 1st of every month, $1,200, like clockwork. But within 3 to 5 days of each deposit, $900 was being automatically transferred out. Not to a vendor, not to a medical provider, to a second checking account at a bank in Raleigh, an account in Kyle's name only, an account I'd never opened, never authorized, and never heard of. 8 months of transfers, $7,200 gone. I stared at the screen. The numbers didn't blur. They just sat there, clean and undeniable. The clerk shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, would you like me to print these records? Yes, I said. All of them. She printed 12 pages. I stapled them myself at the counter. Day 3. I drove to the Family Readiness Group coordinator's office on the other side of post. I sat down and asked one question. Did Kyle Torres file a family separation allowance claim during my deployment? She checked the system. He had. $2,400. He'd told them I had abandoned the family, that I had voluntarily separated from my spouse and child. that he was the sole caretaker of Lily with no military spouse support. Every single word was a lie, and the United States Army had cut him a check for it. I thanked her. I asked for a printout. She gave me one. Day 4. Donna came through. She met me in the commissary parking lot during her lunch break and handed me a manila envelope through the car window. Inside were 3 photographs she'd taken from her own front porch with her phone, each one time-stamped. Tessa's gray Hyundai Sonata in my driveway. April 12th, 9:14 p.m. May 3rd, 11:22 p.m. June 19th, 7:45 a.m. An overnight that went into morning. Alongside the photos was a 2-page sworn statement, handwritten, signed and dated in blue ink. At the bottom of the second page, Donna had written one line. I kept these because I thought you'd need them someday. I read that line 3 times. Then I folded everything carefully back into the envelope and set it on the passenger seat, beside the DFA's printout, the FRG claim record, and the housing office documentation. Day 5. I filed 2 things. First, an emergency custody petition, drafted with Captain Reeves, and submitted through Cumberland County Family Court with full JAG oversight and military co-representation. Second, a formal written complaint to the Fort Liberty Garrison Commander's Office, requesting a command investigation into the forged DA Form 487, the fraudulent family separation allowance claim, and the unauthorized modification of government-assigned housing. I hand-delivered both, walked them in, watched them get stamped. That evening, I sat in Donna's guest room with the folder on the bed beside me, 3 inches thick. Every receipt, every bank statement, every photograph, every forged document, every lie Kyle had told, organized chronologically with color-coded tabs and a handwritten index on the inside cover. I'd built supply manifests in desert heat for 9 months. I'd tracked shipments across 6 countries and 4 time zones without losing a single crate. This was just another inventory. Except this time, the thing I was accounting for was my entire life. Friday evening. Folder closed. Tabs aligned. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it. I was ready. Captain Reeves called Saturday morning at 08:15. I was already awake. I'd been awake since 5, sitting in Donna's kitchen with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. Hearing set. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Cumberland County Courthouse. Emergency custody petition. Judge Patricia Daniels presiding. I wrote the details on the legal pad in front of me. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Daniels. I underlined Daniels twice. He walked me through what to expect. The civilian court would handle custody, temporary orders first, then a full evaluation later. His role was to present the military context, the forged 4187, separation allowance, the housing violation. He'd already briefed the garrison commander's office. A referral to CID was being drafted. Regardless of what happened Wednesday in family court, Kyle was going to face a separate federal investigation. This is going to be hard, Captain Reeves said. Not soft about it, just honest. The evidence is overwhelming, but courtrooms aren't spreadsheets. He's going to talk. He's going to explain. You'll have to sit across from him and listen to his version of what he did. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Good. On Sunday, I met Melissa Vance at a coffee shop on Bragg Boulevard. She was the civilian attorney Captain Reeves had recommended. Mid-40s, sharp, no wasted words. She'd been handling military family law cases out of Fayetteville for 15 years. We sat in a corner booth and she spread my folder across the table, going through it page by page while her latte went cold beside her. She read the 4187 twice. She looked at Donna's photographs for a long time. She read the DFA's records, running her finger down each column, and when she reached the total, $7,200, she tapped it once with her nail and looked up at me. Rachel, I've seen a lot of custody cases. A lot. This one isn't close. I don't care about close, I said. I care about Lily being safe. Melissa nodded slowly. Then we make sure the judge sees exactly who he is. Not who he says he is. Not the version he's going to perform in that courtroom. Who he actually is. Documented on paper, page by page. Monday evening, Kyle called. I was sitting on Donna's back porch watching the sunset turn the tree line orange and gold. His name flashed on my screen, and my thumb hovered for 2 full rings before I answered. Rach. Easy voice, casual, like he was calling about a billing error. I heard something's going on, some kind of court thing. Look, I know you're upset about the Tessa situation, but you're blowing this way out of proportion. Just come home and we'll sit down like adults and figure this out. Come home. To the house he locked me out of. To the home where my daughter called another woman Mama T. Come home and figure it out. I let 3 seconds of silence sit between us. Then I said 4 words. See you Wednesday, Kyle. I hung up. I set the phone face down on the porch rail and didn't pick it up again. Tuesday night, I stood in Donna's laundry room and pressed my dress uniform on her ironing board. The same uniform I'd been wearing on that porch 6 days earlier when my key didn't turn and my daughter didn't know my face. I ran the iron across the sleeves slowly. I lined up the creases. I checked the ribbons. I hung it on the back of the door and stood there looking at it. The name tape, the rank insignia, the unit patch, everything I was, everything he'd tried to erase. Tomorrow Lily would see me in this uniform. And this time, she would remember. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. Wednesday at the Cumberland County Courthouse. I arrived at 8:15. Kyle walked in at 8:58 in a wrinkled polo and khakis. He was smiling. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor polish. It was smaller than I expected. No gallery rows, no jury box, just 2 tables facing a raised bench with the state seal mounted on the wall behind it. A clerk sat to the left with a stack of files. A court reporter sat to the right with her fingers already resting on the keys. The overhead lights hummed faintly. Outside, I could hear a lawnmower somewhere on the courthouse grounds. I sat at the left table, with Melissa beside me, and Captain Reeves 1 seat over, in his Class A uniform. My folder was centered in front of me, 3 inches thick, tabbed, indexed. I hadn't opened it yet. My hands were flat on the table, steady. Kyle sat at the right table alone. Gloria was 1 row behind him in the small seating area, purse in her lap, both hands on the clasp. No attorney beside him. He'd come without counsel. The smile was still there, this loose, easy grin, like he'd been called in for a minor traffic matter and expected to walk out in 20 minutes. Judge Daniels entered, mid-50s, reading glasses, no expression. She sat down, opened a file folder the clerk handed her, and read silently for what felt like a very long time. The room waited. The court reporter waited. The clock on the wall behind the bench ticked loud enough that I could hear each second. This is an emergency custody petition filed by Staff Sergeant Rachel Torres regarding the minor child Lily Marie Torres, age 3. Is that correct? Melissa stood. Yes, Your Honor. And the respondent is Kyle James Torres, the child's father? Kyle half raised his hand from the table like he was answering roll call. That's me, Your Honor. The judge looked at him over her reading glasses for a moment. Then she turned to Melissa. Proceed. Melissa didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She laid each piece of evidence on the table the way I'd seen senior NCOs lay out supply reports. One at a time, in order, with nothing wasted. First, the forged DA Form 4187, with a side-by-side comparison of my real signature from my service record. She pointed out 3 discrepancies in the letter formation. The judge leaned forward. Second, the DFA's allotment records. 12 pages showing $1,200 deposits and $900 transfers, month after month, to Kyle's personal account in Raleigh. Total, $7,200. Third, the fraudulent family separation allowance claim. $2,400 paid to Kyle, based on the statement that I had voluntarily abandoned my family. Fourth, Donna's sworn statement, and the 3 time-stamped photographs of Tessa's gray Sonata in the driveway. April, May, June, overnight. Fifth, the housing office records confirming the lock change and the unauthorized reassignment of government quarters. She explained each piece, calmly, clinically, no dramatics, just facts in chronological order, connected by dates and dollar amounts. Kyle's smile disappeared around the 3rd document. By the 5th, he was leaning forward in his chair, shaking his head. His jaw was tight. That's not. She's making this sound worse than it. Judge Daniels raised 1 finger without looking up from the document she was reviewing. Mr. Torres, you will have your opportunity to respond. Do not interrupt counsel again. He sat back. His knee started bouncing under the table. I could see it from where I sat. Melissa continued. She walked the judge through the full timeline. The deployment orders in October. The DFA's allotment setup. The video calls that stopped being answered. The neighbor's observations starting in April. The early return home. The locked door. She described what I found on that porch. She let the phrase, "Daddy, who's that lady?" hang in the courtroom air for 3 full seconds of silence before she moved on. Gloria shifted in her seat behind Kyle. Her knuckles were white on that purse clasp. Then Captain Reeves stood. He introduced himself, his role, and his legal authority. He spoke in the measured, precise cadence of someone who had done this before. Not theatrical, not cold, just exact. He explained that the forged 4187 was not a domestic dispute and not a matter of poor judgment. It was a criminal act against the federal government. He outlined the UCMJ implications. Article 134, fraud. Article 121, larceny of government funds. He stated that the Fort Liberty garrison commander had already authorized a preliminary inquiry and that a formal referral to CID, the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, was in active progress. Mr. Torres is not a service member, Captain Reeves said evenly. But the documents he forged are government forms. The funds he diverted are government-administered allotments. The housing he occupied and modified is government property on a federal military installation. The military's jurisdiction over these matters is independent of any ruling this court makes today. Kyle turned his whole body toward Gloria. She was looking at the floor. She didn't look up. Judge Daniels removed her glasses. She placed them on the bench beside her file and folded her hands. Mr. Torres, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to what's been presented. Kyle stood. He gripped the edge of the table with both hands. His face was flushed from the jaw up. Your Honor, this is... Look, I was trying to hold things together. She was gone for 9 months. 9 months. I was alone with a baby. I didn't have any help. I didn't have money. I was doing the best I could with what I had. You had $1,200 a month in deposited allotment, Melissa said from her seat. Counsel, the judge warned. Then, to Kyle, continue. The form, the 4187 thing. I didn't know what it was. A buddy helped me fill it out. I thought it was just a housing transfer. I wasn't trying to commit fraud, or whatever they're calling it. I was trying to keep a roof over my daughter's head. By removing her mother's name from the housing assignment, the judge said. It wasn't like that. Mr. Torres, did you sign your wife's name to that form? He swallowed. His fingers tightened on the table edge. Yes, but, did your wife authorize you to sign on her behalf for that specific document? We had a power of attorney. I thought... Captain Reeves spoke without standing. The limited power of attorney on file through JAG authorized Mr. Torres to make medical decisions for the minor child and handle routine housing maintenance. It did not authorize him to execute personnel action requests, reassign government quarters, alter government records, or forge the service member's signature on any department of the Army form. Kyle's mouth opened. His eyes moved from Reeves to Melissa to the judge. Nothing came out. The courtroom was very quiet. The lawnmower outside had stopped. Judge Daniels looked down at the documents spread in front of her. She read for a long time. When she looked up, her voice was level and clear. I've reviewed the emergency petition, the supporting documentation, and the statements provided by both parties and by military counsel. Based on the evidence before me, I'm granting temporary full legal and physical custody of Lily Marie Torres to Staff Sergeant Rachel Torres, effective immediately. She paused. Mr. Torres is ordered to vacate the on-post housing unit within 72 hours. He is prohibited from unsupervised contact with the minor child until a full custody evaluation is completed by this court. The financial irregularities and the document fraud will be addressed through the appropriate military and civilian investigative channels. She looked directly at Kyle. Mr. Torres, a woman served her country for 9 months. She came home to a locked door and a child who didn't recognize her. That is not holding things together. That is taking them apart. She put her glasses back on. She picked up her gavel. The gavel came down at 10:47 a.m. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Kyle was out of the house in 48 hours. Gloria drove up from Raleigh with a rented U-Haul and packed his things, while I sat at Donna's kitchen table and drank coffee. I didn't go over. I didn't watch. Donna did. She texted me when the truck pulled away. Gone. Tessa vanished before the hearing was over. She wasn't at the house when Gloria arrived to pack. I never learned her last name. I never needed to. CID opened a formal investigation 2 days after the ruling. Kyle was barred from Fort Liberty pending the outcome. Captain Reeves told me the fraud charges alone could carry significant time. The forged 4187 was the worst of it. Not because of the dollar amount, but because of the intent. This wasn't impulsive, Reeves said over the phone. He sat down, studied the form, practiced the signature, and walked it into a government office. That's premeditation. I moved back into building 4917 on a Thursday afternoon. The housing office had rekeyed the lock again, this time in my name, the way it always should have been. The new key turned smooth. I stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. The living room was half empty. Kyle had taken the couch, the TV, and the coffee table. He'd left the kitchen intact. The high chair by the window, the dish rack, the microwave with the dented door I kept meaning to replace. The crack in the driveway was still there. The kitchen window still didn't close all the way. The bones of the place were the same. It still smelled like home. But Lily's room was different. Pink butterfly sheets I didn't recognize. A unicorn nightlight I didn't buy. A sippy cup sitting on the dresser with a name written on it in permanent marker, Tessa. I stood in the doorway of my daughter's room and looked at every piece of a life I hadn't been part of. Then I stripped the bed. I folded the butterfly sheets neatly, put them in a garbage bag, and set them by the front door. I picked up the sippy cup and threw it in the kitchen trash. Then I went to the hallway closet and found what I was looking for, in a box on the top shelf, still sealed in the plastic. The bedding set I'd ordered online the week before I deployed, yellow sheets with small white stars. I'd bought them because Lily used to stare at the ceiling fan light before she fell asleep, and I thought the stars would give her something gentler to look at. I made the bed, tucked the corners tight, army tight, set the stuffed camel from Frankfurt on the pillow. That night, I gave Lily a bath. She splashed. She laughed at nothing. She grabbed my dog tags, I'd forgotten I was still wearing them, and pulled them toward her mouth the way toddlers do with anything that shines. I lifted her out of the tub, wrapped her in a towel, and held her against my shoulder. She was warm and heavy and real. "Mama," she said, quiet, almost a whisper, like she was testing the word to see if it still worked. I held her there for a long time. After she fell asleep in her yellow star sheets with the camel tucked under her arm, I walked to the kitchen. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet under the sink. I didn't plan to cry, but the weight of everything, the porch, the key, the courtroom, the pink butterfly sheets, the word mama, came down all at once. Not sadness, not anger, relief, the kind that doesn't let you stand up. 3 days later, Donna knocked on my door with a casserole in one hand and a card in the other. The card was signed by 4 neighbors from our row. Inside, in somebody's careful handwriting, it said, "Welcome home, Staff Sergeant. For real this time." That night, after Lily fell asleep in her yellow star sheets, I sat on the porch where I'd stood 6 days earlier, with a key that didn't work. The door was open behind me now, and so was I. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the courtroom. It wasn't the forged paperwork, or the missing money, or the woman in my bathrobe on my couch with my daughter in her lap. The hardest part was standing on that porch at 11:40 at night and hearing my daughter ask who I was. That was the moment everything broke open. Not the marriage, that was already gone, even if I hadn't admitted it yet. What broke was the story I'd been telling myself for 9 months. That if I did my job, kept my head down, sent the money home, and didn't ask too many questions, everything would hold together until I got back. I believed that if I was disciplined enough, the people I loved would be safe. I was wrong. Discipline can hold a supply chain together across 6 countries and 4 time zones. It can't hold a person who doesn't want to be held. I used to think homecoming was about the door, the front door, the airport gate, the first hug. But real homecoming isn't walking through a door. It's being recognized by the people on the other side. And for a while, I wasn't. My daughter looked at me through a screen door and saw a stranger. That will stay with me longer than any deployment, longer than any courtroom ruling, longer than any document with my forged name at the bottom. But here's what I know now. The uniform I pressed the night before that hearing wasn't armor. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. It showed me who I'd been the whole time, even when the people closest to me forgot. I didn't become strong in that courtroom. I walked in already strong. I'd been strong in Kuwait, strong on that porch, and strong at Donna's kitchen table at 1 in the morning with coffee I could barely taste. The courtroom just made it visible. And Lily, she's the reason all of it mattered. Not the custody ruling. Not the verdict. The fact that my daughter will grow up knowing her mother came home, found the door locked, and didn't walk away. I didn't fight Kyle. I fought for her. Every document, every tab in that folder, every morning I showed up at JAG in a pressed uniform on no sleep, that was for Lily. Someday, when she's old enough, I'll tell her this story. Not to make her hate her father, not to make her feel sorry for me. I'll tell her so she knows one thing. Walking away from someone who hurts you isn't giving up. It's the bravest thing a woman can do. And I want her to learn that from me, not from experience. If my story gave you anything at all, I hope it's this. You deserve a door that opens when you come home. Thank you for spending this time with me. I mean that. Sitting with someone's story all the way to the end takes patience, and I'm grateful you stayed. If any part of this reminded you of your own homecoming, or a door that didn't open the way it should have, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Your story matters just as much as mine. And if you'd like to hear more stories about women who fought for what was theirs, I'd love for you to join me here. Hit subscribe so we can keep doing this together. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and never forget what you're worth.